start film in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to 1977's House, a Japanese film by Toho that is often referred to as Hausu. The film was originally supposed to be this big blockbuster extravaganza, if you will, as Toho was really looking for their version of Jaws, which was often considered the first blockbuster film, because the movie industry in Japan had died down at this point because of television, so they were really looking for that big hit. So they got a relatively unknown director. As a matter of fact, he was a commercial director, Nobuhiko Obayashi. I apologize if I butchered that name. So he came up with the concept and everything, and he was going to not direct the film because Toho has a very set in their ways mentality of, no, our films are directed by our very select group of directors that specifically only direct our film. So that was the plan. However, none of the directors wanted to touch the project. They thought it was very out there and crazy, which it was, because most of the horror elements that we will eventually see in the film are dreamed up by Obayashi's, at the time, 9-year-old daughter. So that's where most of this insanity comes from. Of course, this movie I can describe as Scooby-Doo meets an acid trip. It is wild and imaginative and crazy, and I highly recommend this film. Obviously, that's why I'm doing a commentary track on it. It is my favorite film of all time, hands down, and you will see partly why throughout the movie, and I do hope you enjoy. So at this point, we have met 2 of our 7 main characters, Gorgeous and Sweet. Is this Sweet? No, this is Fantasy. My apologies. Again, I apologize for any screw-ups at this point. So they're in the beginnings of summer vacation. They're looking forward to it, but all is not what it seems. So here they are, just dancing around, again, being excited for summer vacation, as most high school kids are. Now, of course, there's a lot of interesting editing choices. Again, Obayashi is a commercial director, so there's a lot of very commercial cuts and things like that, as well as most of the actresses in this film are also commercial actresses. Obayashi had worked with a lot of these girls on many of his commercials, so that's where he was able to find these actresses. Of course, Gorgeous is now home, as we see, as her father has returned from his film trip, as he is a composer for film. Now, most of the actresses in this film as well, this is their only film role. I think most of them returned to commercial acting after this and modeling and whatnot. So Gorgeous here is about to receive some very unfortunate news, or some contradicting news that she doesn't quite want to hear. So here she was concerned that maybe the trip was canceled. However, that's not the case. It's that there's going to be someone coming with them. And here we are. We're meeting sort of the conflict, or the cause of conflict, Miss Ryuko, who, of course, as we're about to find out. Also, I apologize in advance that there may be spoilers, so those who have not seen the movie yet, I apologize. So here's the meeting of Miss Ryuko and Gorgeous. And we find out that she is a jewelry maker, which is odd that somebody in film would meet a jewelry maker and how this would come about, especially since he was just in Italy, of all things. So, strange things happening. So, yes, Gorgeous has just found out that his father is, or her father is engaged. My apologies. Um, so she's not taking this news quite as well because, again, she's missing her mother, who unfortunately passed away 8 years prior. And of course, he's trying to sell this off by saying that she can now do traditional women's roles, quote unquote, traditional, of course. And Gorgeous is just having none of this. Also, I just want to point out that a lot of the backgrounds are beautiful matte paintings, and they really do add so much to the scene, and they're just fantastic. I absolutely love them. And of course, very traditional 70s things. And then we're entering Gorgeous's room, and I really love her walls with all the roses and the colors. It's very fantastic. Of course, we also get this weird sort of, hey, the sun is still setting here, but also it seems kind of strange how there would still be the orange light on this side of the house as it looks like she's gone to the completely other side of the house. So it's kind of like, where is the sun coming from? Clearly, this sun is not of our Earth, based on how the sun works. But again, it's a movie, so who cares? So now she is looking and reminiscing at old photos here. And of course, we're going to get the traditional I'm angry at this person, so I'm going to now cut all of this person out of all the photos. And I'm just too angry at this, and I just don't want to deal with this anymore. Kind of vibe as she reminisces to when her mother was alive. Um, Back to sort of the film's creation. Again, um, Toho had greenlit this in the early to mid 70s, very quickly, which was a huge surprise to Obayashi, as well as many people. However, due to their stubborn ways of our directors have to direct this, um, Obayashi had about 2 years of pre-planning, which is unheard of for a film, because he wasn't set to direct the film. So you have a lot of time as he's planning as if he's ever going to get chosen to direct the film. So he's asked Toho, "Can I please put this on a business card?" They were like, "Yeah, go ahead. It's not gonna matter." So here we are meeting the rest of the cast, the other 6 girls in total, um, and we'll find all their names. They're very stereotypical. You know, you have the smart girl, the musical girl, the sort of active girl. You have the girl who eats a lot, or the character who eats a lot. So it's very stereotypical, like, I'm the nerd, I'm the this, I'm the that. So you have all of these character tropes. So you have Prof, the nerdy smart girl, and then sweet fantasy, and then you have Mac, who obviously cooks and eats a lot, as you can see with the characters making fun of her for eating too much. And then you have Melody, who of course is the magician. Magician. Not magician, musician. My apologies again. And, of course, Gorgeous, who is supposed to be the hot one, even though they're all fairly attractive. And, of course, our comic relief character, Mr. Togo, who, of course, is a teacher who is breaking bad news to the group as they cannot go to this training camp that they were looking forward to this summer because his sister is having a child. But then Gorgeous has this amazing idea of why don't you all come with me to my mother's hometown? So they're all treating Mr. Togo like crap because, again, he's more for comic relief, as we'll see. So Gorgeous has now given the idea of come with me to my mother's hometown to visit my aunt. And they're all pretty down for this idea. And here we see Gorgeous be stating to write the letter to her aunt. I don't know why I said stating there, but continuing on. And she's really hoping that her aunt will accept. But we will see how that turns. And of course, back to sort of more about the film. So after Obayashi made the business cards, and everyone was like getting intrigued about this film. When is this film coming? Please tell me this film is coming soon. And of course, there was a radio drama based on the film. There was a manga based on the idea of the film. And eventually, Toho did acquiesce and let Obayashi direct the film. And this is the product we have. This incredible film that is mwah, over the top and great. So here we see Gorgeous being disappointed that the letter hasn't shown up. And here's the letter, the response from her aunt about whether they can come or not. And here's the cat. This cat plays a very important role throughout the film, though we will find out why later on. And I will try to not spoil too much here early on and wait as we continue. And here we have her aunt saying, yes, you can come to my house, and I've been looking forward to this. And now we see that Gorgeous's father is rather disappointed that his daughter has decided to not go on the family trip, and that he feels terrible that Ryuko has taken time off. But Ryuko doesn't mind it, and as we just saw there, will be going to her aunt's house to have a talk. Of course, I say as we see because, of course, this is a Japanese film, and of course, there are English subtitles in this particular version. There are 3 versions released on Blu-ray currently. I am watching the Criterion release, which was released by Janus Films and the Criterion Collection in 2009. There is the Eureka Masters of Cinema version for those over in the UK and Europe, which was released in 2018. And then there is the Japanese Blu-ray release, which was actually released late January 2021. So there are at least 3 versions that you can watch. And here we are with my favorite song in the movie, and of course our first instance of super comic relief, Mr. Togo, as well as a weird mixture of languages here. As you see, Good Morning Painter, there's going to be a bit of English, there's going to be some French for some reason, and Japanese. Yes, as you see the Bonjour Monsieur and the Good Morning. And here's our first instance of Mr. Togo sort of getting screwed over as he falls down the stairs here and gets his stuck in a bucket. And sort of that commercial editing that I was talking about earlier. And here we are seeing the girls awaiting at the train station. and Mr. Togo stating that he won't be able to make it as he has to go to the hospital. Also, just backtracking there, these gentlemen that you saw outside the train station, they literally serve no purpose. They're just there to say goodbye. We don't know who they are. They're not important to the story. We don't even know their names. They're just there. And also a matte painting background there. There's often sort of this fourth wall sort of thing going on throughout the film, and I'll get more into that as we head further into the film. And very well. Um, of course, I have never read the manga for the film. I definitely want to try and see if I can find it, but we will see. Of course, I just want to talk about the version that I'm watching here real quickly. Originally, this was not supposed to be a spined numbered Criterion release. This was supposed to be a part of a Eclipse series, but due to the high demand when this film was brought on by Janus Films and all these college campuses and also some sort of boutique theaters and things like that, and how popular it was, they decided to put it on the Criterion Collection as spine number 539. And I'm glad it's there because there are some interesting special features specifically on this disc. But again, that's the only thing I'm going to mention about the discs for now. So here they are on the train traveling to Gorgeous's mother's hometown. And we sort of get a bit of a backstory here. And of course, we get that cats who can open doors are considered witches. Again, the backgrounds are quite amazing here. I really do enjoy them. The colors, the pop, it's really a 70s film, which is something I really appreciate. So here we go with the backstory of sort of the hometown and a bit of Gorgeous's family, as we see now that during the war, her aunt was set to be married and that everything was kind of going well. But unfortunately, some bad news is happening. Of course, the film never explains exactly where this is going and how they're exactly seeing all this, because it's not like she has a photo album. So it's a bit odd. We now see that there was a draft letter and that they made a promise that he would come back from the war. And again, it's rather odd that they're seeing this, because I'm not sure how readily available cameras were. So this is a bit odd, especially that they're reacting to it. But it kind of adds to the story, which is nice, and sort of adds to the theme, as Obayashi did want to have this bit of a message about the Second World War. And I don't want to get too much into that because we're going to later find out some things that could get into spoiler territory. So I don't want to get, again, too spoilery. I kind of want to keep things a bit simple and not ruin the film for anybody who may be listening to the commentary track instead of watching the film first. Nothing wrong with listening to commentary tracks first and then watching the actual film without them. So here we see Gorgeous's mother getting married, and her aunt is kind of disappointed. And as we see here, we kind of get that first, they don't know what it's like when the bombs fell, so they're kind of taking it for granted sort of thing, as we saw with Mac's comment that it looks like cotton candy. They've also transitioned to a bus at some point, and now they're getting off of the bus. And again, another beautiful matte painting in the background that really shines with the film. It looks absolutely fantastic. And then the sort of mini um matte painting here that they're just standing in front of. Although I can't confirm that the bigger shot of the bus stopping was in fact a matte painting, but it looks like a matte painting to me. So here we are introduced once again to all the characters: Melody, Fantasy, Prof, Sweet, Kung Fu, and Mac. Of course, we're never really given a reason as to why Sweet is called Sweet, because she's not into sweets, and she never really appears sweet, like a sweet person. Of course, they're now wondering about ghosts, but again, their assumptions may be very wrong, and there may be some ghosts in that forest. And here we are with another matte painting as they're just walking through trying to find their way to the village and to the house. And here we are at the watermelon stand. And here is where I will talk about the music. This gentleman right here is actually the composer, and he wanted to make the soundtrack very traditional, professional. He wouldn't go for anything else. So that is why we will also hear the same song over and over again. While there is some other songs, such as Cherries Were Made for Eating and sort of this rendition, there is a lot of repetition with a certain song. So here he is being rather creepy and is about to direct them to the house. There we are, the house in the background. And of course, here's a rather weird part. Mac returns the watermelon to the salesman. And then, well, you'll see here in a moment as to why this is a bit weird. Yes, so clearly he knows something that we don't quite know yet, and that he may have sent them into a trap. So they've almost made it, and here we go. They have now reached the house. And of course, it looks nice. It doesn't look too problematic. But of course, they need to figure out how to get in, as there doesn't seem to be an unlocked door. And of course, this random falcon, at least I think it's a falcon, just randomly just comes in, has no other scenes in the movie at all. And of course, Gorgeous is just applying her makeup here, and Sweet has a camera. And of course, the cat has opened the door, which we have learned may make it a witch. And here is Gorgeous's aunt. A fun fact about the actress and about Japanese acting. Apparently, a lot of risk can be played when playing an older character, as you might get typecast into that. This actress was actually a friend of Obayashi's, and so she took the role, as she wasn't quite worried about being typecasted into the role of a grandmother or an older character. So she took a risk taking this part. And here we get a little bit more backstory as to how the aunt's been doing, and how she used to be a piano teacher and she doesn't get a lot of company and things like that. And of course, they want a picture. But the cat has other plans. And the camera is broken. How unfortunate. And unfortunately, despite Toho's wishes, sorry that I keep getting those two confused, as it were. But yes, Toho unfortunately didn't get that massive blockbuster. They got this cult hit instead, which was much to the dismay because they did pour a lot of money into the production of this film, really hoping that they would have that blockbuster. Now, again, Mac has this watermelon, and it's like, where did you get this watermelon? There is no way you had time to run back to the village to grab it. But of course, there are some other questions that will be raised shortly. So here we see that the house looks a little bit dilapidated and has been quite dirty and dusty and hasn't seen a good cleaning in a few years, it looks like. And of course, the chandelier has this falling thing, and we get sort of this wild editing as Kung Fu kind of deals with the falling chandeliers and the hat just falls. And it looks like Shiro wants to have a bit of this reptile that has been killed by the chandelier piece. And she points out the grand piano's location. Yes, eating the lizard here. Yes, and now all the girls have agreed to help clean the house for the aunt, which is nice. And Melody starts playing the piano, which everyone enjoys. And I often like the reflection coming off the piano. It's just kind of nice, in my opinion. And you see the cobwebs and everything, so it really shows that this area may not have been touched for a few years. Yes. So they're now exploring the house. And of course, we see our good friend, Mr. Skeleton, which has scared some people. Yes. It used to be a treatment room. So here's the song that I mentioned that we will hear multiple times and a few different iterations of that song, which sort of changes it up and doesn't keep the song stale. And so here we have a bit more backstory about the aunt and how she's been very lonely. As it seems that she is the only one that still lives in the village. But it is unknown, as we don't really get to see the village as a whole or anybody inside of it. For most of the movie, our attention is set in the house with a few small snippets here and there. So they now agree to cook and clean and things like that, which is rather nice of the girls to take some time out to care for the aunt. But all is not quite what it seems, and it's quite dangerous. But again, we will see that later. We'll know who cooks. Again, sort of keeping with the tropes. So you have Mac taking care of the kitchen, and you have Sweet sort of keeping with the floor tidying, and it's sort of unknown what the others are doing. And also, we hear the chime of the bell for the first time. There will be 4 other occasions that we hear this clock. And now the aunt is showing them to the kitchen. And of course, The characters are a bit shocked about the kitchen. Granted, I don't know what a 70s kitchen is supposed to look like, but here in 2021, it looks like the standard size of a apartment kitchen. I mean, even in the 2010s, it looks like a standard kitchen. Nothing too fancy. But again, I don't know what a 70s kitchen would have looked like at this point. You know, standard stove, fridge, you know. However, fridge is out of order. So they're going to go to the well to put the watermelon inside, and sort of the aunt kind of giving a wink to the camera. Sort of the fourth wall breaking, perhaps. There are much better options here. Now, this scene coming up right here, it actually took me about my sixth watch to realize that there's an actual rat here, because I never noticed the rats here. And it wasn't until the sixth watch where I was like, oh, there are actual rats here, despite the fact that you can read them with the subtitles. But I just never noticed them until then. So now the watermelon is all set. And 3, 2, 1, into the well it goes. Now, granted, I didn't know that people could put fruit in the well to keep them cold. I've never done that before. And I lived in a house with well water before, but we didn't use it for those kinds of things. So it just seems rather odd that you could do this. A cool thing, but rather odd. And of course, the girls are now just playing. And we find out here that she is not a fan of sunlight. And we may find out why later on. And then we have the painting, which may become important later. Now, here's the thing, right? So they have this huge feast prepared, but it's never explained where they've gotten the food. It's never shown that they've brought the food in or where the food is being stored, because it looks like there's many things that would need to be refrigerated here. But again, the fridge is broken, so where did they get this food? As it is never explained. And Mac goes off to get the watermelon. However, you should never go alone, as we will find out. So now they're cleaning up from dinner, and the bell chimes again. And now they're sort of just trying to have a plan, but they're not exactly sure. So now they're going to go find Max, so they send Fantasy off to go find her. But will she be found? Again, another beautiful matte painting here. Very nicely done. I really do enjoy the colors that they often use, especially here. So she goes to get the watermelon. But unfortunately, it is not what it seems to be. As not a watermelon. It's Mac's decapitated head. And here you go. The first victim. And so now it is just a floating head. That must have taken quite a lot of work to actually do, and then you see it vomiting out bloody water. And everyone is just freaking. Well, Fantasy is freaking out. And she tries to explain. Oh, and here comes the aunt, who seems to be doing a lot better. And then Fantasy is trying to explain that there's a decapitated head in the well. And we find out that the aunt can walk. Strange. And now everyone sort of goes into a group, or as a group, to see what's going on with the well. And Gorgeous is consoling Fantasy over what she has seen. So now we've had our first victim of the film. However, it seems that it was in fact just the watermelon. Something strange is going on. And of course, now the aunt will be screwing around with Fantasy, as we now know that it was in fact Mac's head that was in the well. And she sort of winks, and we see the eyeball. And using the eyeball to look around. But it is unknown if everybody else is actually eating Mac or not. So the group kind of splits back into cleaning now. And of course, they mentioned this potato field down the road, but you kind of climbed a giant hill, so where's this potato field exactly? As we didn't really see one. And then sort of that nod that they're actually eating fantasy, or they're eating Mac, my apologies. And it's weird that they say sponsor, but it must be something commonly said in Japan. And once again, everyone's sort of back to cleaning the house and sort of setting up for everyone to stay the night. That is, if they make it through. And now, sort of, everyone's kind of getting worried as to where Mac actually is. And we see Prof being thirsty, and we see that the blood is now sort of coming in. And so she's just having a nice tall glass of blood, it would seem. And now, Gorgeous is having a bath, which is what it is, and then sort of back to the witch cat sort of thing as Shiro keeps opening doors, but nobody's taking this tall tale seriously, though maybe they should be. So now Sweet has gone to go get the bedding, and again, this relatively dark shot sort of adds to the mystery as she just starts hearing this voice, but she's not 100% sure what it is. And it's this creepy little doll here. Never trust a creepy doll, folks. If you see a doll, run as fast as you can in the opposite direction. So the doll seems to have locked the door. And then Kung Fu enjoying the sunset here. Again, another fantastic matte painting. Something I miss in film today is matte paintings and whatnot rather than CG. But again, I don't know if matte paintings would work in this day and age. So she's really enjoying herself in the countryside. And we hear a train off in the distance. It's also rather odd because they didn't come by train, they came by bus. And then here we have sort of a Japanese folklore coming up as well, here in a few more seconds, as she's asking for more water. Now it's weird that she asks for more water, and yet Kung Fu has gone to chop wood. So that's a bit bizarre. Perhaps to get more water, they need more heat, so they need more wood for the fire. And here we have the hair coming up, try to grab her. So it didn't start in the ring. It's been around for quite a while in Japanese films. And here we have the haunted wood, if you will, the haunted logs. And insects quite being noisy. And here we go. The battle between Kung Fu and logs. And she's just like, yeah, I took care of these logs. And we get the perfect catch. And nobody knows where Sweet is at this point. They're just kind of concerned as to where their friend is now. And here we have the aunt feeling very, very energetic. And then she mentions the town, which is quite possibly a ghost town at this point because she keeps referring to it in the past tense. And here's another sort of the aunt messing with fantasy as we just see her enter the fridge. As we find out that she's somehow in the ceiling here, staring at the girls, and we get this second sort of fourth wall smile into the camera. And now she's dancing. And there's our friend the skeleton. Again, I use this scene here as a gif quite often. It's fantastic. And then we see her eating Mac's hand, proving that she wanted the girls here for a meal. And then somehow reviving Goldfish. And then we have the cat rendition of the song. Very excited she is about having a meal or three. Hear the plane overhead, which is possibly the aunt reminiscing or feeling upset about the Second World War as her fiance was shot down in a plane. Now we have Gorgeous here. Finished her bath and walking around. Again, very nice use of lighting. While limited, you still kind of see everything until she starts climbing the stairs. And it's unsure where she's exactly going. She seems a bit confused. And the door just opens. And we're not sure whose room this is, but it's a very nice room. And we see this cat logo a few times in the film. I guess this is her aunt's makeup room, if you will. Picture of her fiance at the time. And then Gorgeous sees the makeup and whatnot and opens this music box that plays A very familiar song for us, the audience. And then Melody returns to the piano. And it should speak to something that the metronome just kind of starts. And of course, we now get a piano rendition of that oh so familiar song. Of course, the composer would go on to also do Yata Man, which may have also been before the film as well, as I don't recall when exactly Yata Man started animation. But yes, that particularly popular anime was done by this composer as well. And we see our skeleton friend once again dancing in the background. Again, this isn't quite straight up a horror movie. It's very much sort of like a horror comedy, and there are a lot of comic relief moments, as there isn't anything particularly super scary in the film, but it is a fantastic horror movie, and one that I would honestly suggest for sort of like person's first horror movie, as it's not too frightening, and it's just it's a fantastic ride for people. And here we have Gorgeous putting on makeup in this room, but again, as she begins to put makeup here, things are not quite what they seem, and she is now somewhat in trouble. Again, Ryuko's scarf sort of there, and then you have the aunt saying how she would love for Gorgeous to come see her. So you have this moment as well. But then you have sort of the house sort of regaining its power and being like, we now have our hold on you. As she doesn't understand what's going on. And then you now understand that Gorgeous is no longer who we think she is, as she has now been sort of captured by the house. And the bleeding mirror, which is rather unfortunate for that mirror. It seems better days. And then Gorgeous is now sort of set on fire, if you will. Which is unfortunate. Of course, no, I won't state that yet. I'll wait till it's more obvious. And the song continues. At least it's a nice song and not too overbearing. So it's something that doesn't overstay its welcome, which is nice. And also, it doesn't quite, it's kind of not noticeable through a lot of the film until they want you to pay attention to it. And so that's also nice that it's not so hard hitting, oh my god, please stop this song. So here we're back to Sweet, who has just been staring at this doll the entire time. And then you sort of realize that now they should have taken that sort of wives' tale seriously, that a cat that can open doors shouldn't be trusted. And then for some reason they hear Melody screaming, but not Sweet. At least, not yet. As now, fantasy splits off from the groove. to go find Sweet. And here we see that the betting is now attacking Sweet, which is causing some issues. So here we have Sweet getting murdered by this betting, as the house has now regained enough strength to really devour its victims. So this insanity is happening, and Fantasy is trying her hardest to get into the room. And again, as we just saw there briefly, we see that cat symbol outside the doors, as it's also changing briefly. And now we get this: the piano has bitten me. And then Fantasy comes in again, hyperbolic, saying something's happening. Sweet is in danger, and she's trying to get everyone to go. Then I guess Melody needs to use the bathroom. So the girls are now running to find Sweet. And then Fantasy is being called for. As much as they're starting to notice that things are a bit odd, it doesn't stop them from sort of playing pranks on each other. Typical teenager attitude. Also, it should be noted that we don't really see much of the aunt from this point on. She's just kind of gone at this point. And then you see that Fantasy has been sort of messed with by Melody's sort of prank there. And then the other two girls find Melody or Sweet's clothing, but no sign of Sweet, which is rather odd. And now the group has met up with each other. And then they find the doll and Shiro. Which is all very odd. And once again, nobody's believing Fantasy, as they think it's all her imagination. And then realizing that Mac is gone too, they're starting to realize that there is an actual problem here and are completely unaware of the actual danger they are actually in. And then, of course, Fantasy sort of fantasizing about Mr. Togo. And of course, sort of this weird sort of what the hell is going on type of thing happening here, where craziness happens. But of course, this is not the end of the film. There is no happy ending. At this point, anyway. And now they realize that Gorgeous hasn't been seen for a while. So now they are concerned about their friend and are going to find her. So yes, they think she's playing a game, but unfortunately, no games are being played here. And again, that cat logo. And they have no idea where she is at this point. And she's appeared behind them. But of course, This is not the Gorgeous that they came into the house with. This is not the same person anymore. It's rather odd that they know he's coming in the buggy because he never stated that before. All he said is that he's going to the hospital first. He never mentioned how he was specifically getting to the village and to the house. So it's a bit weird. So now they go to call the police, but Gorgeous offers to call them instead, sort of to stop them from leaving, of course. So she grabs the phone here, and we hear somebody crying for help, but we have no idea who is crying for help at this point, and we may never know. We just hear these screams, and then she hangs up. Of course, the other thing that we have to realize is that it's very plausible that the phone is out of order because, as you remember, there was that crystal that shot right into the phone. So it's quite possible. And so Gorgeous is leaving and asks them to stay there. And now they start to realize how much danger they're in as you see this mummy for 2 seconds, but you also see that the door is locked from the inside, which should scream something. So they're now trying to escape the house, but the house is just locking itself in to keep them trapped. So there's nowhere for them to go. They're just trapped inside with nowhere to go, as we see. As the house is now shutting down and also shutting all the lights, and the gate itself locks. And we get a nice shot here with the moon. I'm once again not sure if this is a matte painting or not, or exactly what it is. We now see Gorgeous walking throughout this garden here, and we finally find out that there's lyrics to this song that we have heard multiple times now. Which again, they keep the song fresh by changing it up, whether it was the cat version, the piano version, the regular version, and now this vocal rendition. It's all very fantastic. And sort of this foggy, sort of almost nightmarish quality to this garden here. And then the juggling of these ghostly orbs, which is rather nice. Don't have to really teach someone how to juggle. And then we get this sort of, where's Mr. Togo at this point? And sort of, so we get these multiple sort of 30-second, 20-second breaks as we find out what our comic relief character is doing. We find out that he's stuck in heavy traffic, which is rather odd because although we don't see how long he's in the hospital for, so it's quite possible that he's just gotten out of the hospital. And here we have Kung Fu trying to use some martial arts to try to break the door down, but to no avail. And now Prof tries to bring some logic into this, that there's a device that automatically locks the house down. However, I don't know if that existed in the 70s. So it's hard to say if that was a thing, especially with most of it being wood, that there would have been something that would have locked that down. Again, I'm not sure when automated doors existed, but it's quite possible by the late 70s that those were a thing. I am just unaware, so I'm just going off of things based on my recollection. I would think that maybe the mid 80s was when automatic doors and the like would have been very prominent. And here we see that they find Mac's hand, and they finally realize that Mac is dead, but they're not 100% sure quite what is going on, and they're still trying to logically think and not try to think of the supernatural and the fantastical. So now they're asking Melody to play the piano. Just try to even the mood, lighten the mood, and try to find some sort of positivity in this crazy evening that they're having. And then they're trying to figure out if Gorgeous should have returned by now or not. And then they're starting to realize that fantasy hasn't been making things up, and that logic should no longer be applied. And then they're saying that Fantasy's imagination would go too crazy if she spoke what she thought. And here we have Melody sort of looking like she's in a trance, just playing the piano here. I don't know if it's intentional, but that's definitely what it's giving off. And here they think that Gorgeous has returned. And they're sort of having hope return. And then you have Melody still sort of in her trance. And then Fantasy offers to stay with Melody just in case something were to go awry, sort of splitting up Scooby Doo style 2-on-2, even though Scooby Doo, of course, was more 2 and 3. But that's besides the point. As we now have the piano starting to act up here, and we see that Melody is still definitely in a trance now, confirmed. And then we have Gorgeous sort of in this traditional Japanese wedding attire. And here we are with the best death scene in the entire movie, and we have our friend the skeleton dancing in the background. So Fantasy, my apologies, gets knocked to the floor, and the piano appears to have eaten Melody's fingers. Yes, your fingers are gone. And then, so she seems to be quite happy about this. And then puts her hand down. And once the hand itself is gone, then there's the freak out. And then you have the piano eating Melody here, sort of reminiscent about a certain N64 game and a certain piano. Of course, I'm talking about Mario 64. And I'm not saying that Mario 64 got its idea for the piano in Big Boo's Haunt from this movie, but there are some sort of similarities there. And there you see Fantasy sort of grabbing her arm as Melody continues to be eaten by the piano and laughing. And as you can see, there's a bit of blue screen here, and that's what I was referring to earlier. A lot of blue screen was used, so in order to get this effect to go off, they often painted the actresses blue so that they could get sort of this effect going off. It's very well done, especially for the time. And then we see this book, but we're not sure what this book means. And they're just kind of confused and baffled, but also they're trying to deal with things. And then Prof sees that Gorgeous is in fact a ghost at this point, as there's no reflection. And then Kung Fu asks for the light, and Prof is just getting hysterical here. And here we have Kung Fu becoming very upset as we see Sweet is inside the clock and that the clock has started to bleed. So you have this bleeding clock and the death of her friend Sweet. And it's just heartbreaking for her as she feels guilty for this, for not being able to protect her friend. And then Prof sees what has happened. And now she definitely knows that there is no logic to anything that's happening, and that this is the supernatural. Quite the transition. And then they try to run and meet up with Fantasy, as we are now down to 3. We started with 7, we're now down to 3. And then we see Melody's arm just standing there. And then a very interesting effect coming up here as Prof is looking at the piano in shock as she sees just the fingers playing the keys. And I'm sure it's some sort of puppetry with strings attached to fingers, but it's still quite an impressive effect, in my opinion. And just quite great. And then you have the notes falling on the piano, and you just see the piano lid covered in blood. Very well done, in my opinion. And now they're trying to wake up Fantasy by giving her some water. But she's still hysterical. And then they acknowledge that she was correct. And you see the dead goldfish on her. But Fantasy doesn't want to believe any of this and thinks she is imagining everything. And just the shock. And then we have this transition back to Mr. Togo, and the sort of lightheartedness returns as we see this bear who apparently makes noodles. Again, some weird editing choices, but it just adds to the charm of the film. And then they're barricading themselves to make sure that they are safe. But perhaps maybe barricading themselves wasn't the best idea. And then we see the aunt applying makeup as they start reading from her journal. And we sort of find out exactly what's been going on. And that she's been waiting for her fiance to return, and that she is in denial that he died in the war. But because of this promise, she won't believe it. And the giant head appears, and we find out that Gorgeous is now in this sort of supernatural world, and that her aunt died several years ago, and now she has become the owner of the house. And giant eyeballs. And that great sort of crazy effect. And now the film starts going into overdrive with this crazy insanity as you see all this home appliances, cushions, brooms, all these things start flying everywhere. And then they realize that they need to kill the cat. And Fantasy is just wishing that Gorgeous would save them. And of course, they pray to God to help them, but God can't save you now. And Kung Fu has had enough and is getting the hell out of here, as they're now all hiding behind this table to take cover. And she's going to try the phone here, but the phone will have none of it and tries to kill her. And of course, Mr. Togo has finally made it to at least the bus stop. As we see, he's driving up. And then Kung Fu fights the phone and wins and kicks the phone, and of course, it explodes. Remember, kids, kicking a phone makes it explode. And then she escapes the house, but of course, must now fight Ghost Gorgeous. And he gets relatively closer and closer, but he's starting to lose hope. And so they just have this rolling tussle here. Nothing too incredible in the fight, but I don't think that's what they were going for here in this fight scene. Still some small things, but. And here's where they realize finally that you must kill the house, or the cat. Destroy the cat. So here we go. But the house has one more trick up its sleeve, which is to use the lampshade. And this is the end of Kung Fu. But Kung Fu is not so easily defeated, as we now see that it's just her lower half. So you can see sort of the blue screen coming through again, which again, a lot of action is happening, so of course that would. And then we see all the friends, Mac, Sweet, and Melody, and you just see their body parts sort of just floating in this sort of space. And Kung Fu's head. Like I said, this movie gets absolutely crazy and it's fantastic. And then you just see her leg just kind of fly right into the picture, which unfortunately causes some chaos and some bleeding as the house begins to bleed. And of course, Gorgeous starts to bleed as well, as she has apparently been upstairs the entire time. And then Kung Fu's leg just leaps into this drawer and waves goodbye. And the house begins to bleed even more. And then they try to read the diary. And then the fight is almost over. Mr. Togo can't save you now. And so here comes Mr. Togo to the rescue, or so we think, as he comes driving into the village now. However, there's just one bit of problem here, and that is he meets our friend, the watermelon salesman, who is just enjoying a bit of watermelon. And then he asks where the house is. And this is sort of a bit of more comedy here, as he explains that they were eaten. And he's just like, what the hell are you talking about? And for some reason, there's a bit of fear of watermelon, and somehow the mention of bananas kills this gentleman. He must be extremely allergic to potassium, for even the mere mention of something with potassium causes him to die. And then this crazy editing here. Again, not so much a horror movie specifically, definitely horror comedy and crazy, and I love it for that, as I've mentioned quite a few times now. And oh no, she has lost her glasses and can no longer see. And this monster can here drags her into the ocean of blood, if you will. And of course, Prof is in the blood, but doesn't drown. But unfortunately, there is something much more sinister at play, as she slowly begins to be dissolved. It's almost as if it's not quite just the blood of the cat, but maybe a bit of stomach acid, if you will. So it's almost like she has been eaten as well, but more being dissolved. Of course, you see the blue screen in action as she is covered in blue paint, and you see the dissolve happen, and now we are just down to fantasy. And it would seem that Shiro and Gorgeous are perfectly fine, despite the blood of the house running all through. And fantasy is just hyperbolic in fear and has just no hope left. She's completely lost it. She's gone insane. And here comes Gorgeous walking down the stairs as their barricade is now completely destroyed. There's no defenses left. She now sees her best friend and, of course, goes straight for her, as she's so glad to see her. I am not quite sure why that scream, although now she realizes that in fact Gorgeous is a ghost, as the image of the aunt is seen in the reflection of the blood. She doesn't want to believe it, but somewhere she knows it's true. And then she just kind of falls asleep in Gorgeous' arms. It's Gorgeous just smiles into the camera here. And we get that reveal that in fact she has become a ghost. And or witch. Witch ghost. Yes, witch ghost. And here we have Ryuko driving into the village. We haven't seen her since the beginning of the film, and she just kind of shows up right near the end here, as we get a completely different song to close out the film, which is rather nice. And we see that she has made it to the village and that the buggy is in front of her car. And we see what has happened to Mr. Togo. And the answer is he has become a pile of bananas. That's right, he is dead too. Nobody has won. There's just a pile of bananas in a car with a hat. And here we get sort of blue screen going on. It's a little weird how at the end of the film we kind of get this very much blue screen, blue tint going on. It doesn't take away from anything. It's just a little odd that now we start to see this blue tint throughout. And of course, the wind machine, as she looks elegantly in the wind. There's always just constant wind around Miss Ryoko here. Or Ryuko. My apologies for that mess up there. And again, the house is not opening up, so it is quite possible that during the day the house is asleep and there's no sort of power to the house, whereas at night it becomes the monster that we've seen, which may be why the aunt says that the sun frightens her, as she has not a lot of strength or power to devour her victims. And here we have her trying to find out what's happened. The flowers are blooming. We also saw some grapes. So that could be where there was food, that the aunt possibly had a rather large garden that we're not quite seeing as of yet. Or that we ever see, because we don't really see it at any point. She's just kind of exploring this little miniature garden here as the song plays. And we sort of get like, huzzah, good has triumphed over evil. And here we have Gorgeous sort of opening up the house. Sort of this peaceful moment, and that nothing is wrong, and that everything has returned sort of to normal. But all is not what it seems. So here we have her opening the house, and we see some white cat paintings in the background. Or paintings on the wall, sort of signifying that the cat is still around and that there is still perhaps an evil presence in the house. So we have her opening it up and inviting her in, which of course could be her downfall. As they now have a conversation and a bit of juggling there. And then questioning where the friends are. And of course, the response is that they are still sleeping and will be hungry. But it is unknown what they will be hungry for. Yes. And of course, sort of like most horror movies, we find out Oh, there's Shiro right there. Sorry for getting sidetracked there. But that sort of signifies that there is still much evil. And, of course, Ryuko has been set on fire. And that Gorgeous is now officially the owner of the Hausu. And of course, we get the lesson that love is the only answer, and that the story has been told many times. Of course, Obayashi wanted to bring a little bit of the war into it, and that these girls took it for granted, and the aunt was jealous of that. So that is why sort of this night happened to them, that her jealousy sort of took revenge for their sort of naivety of the war and how lucky they truly were. And so this ends Hausu. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this commentary track and that you'll stop by for my other ones when I record them. I'm planning on doing these roughly maybe once every 2 weeks, releasing one. Of course, this has been my favorite film, starting big, of course, and I hope that you may enjoy this multiple times. That is my hope anyway. I don't know, maybe you'll only listen to these once. But I thank you all very much for tuning in, and hopefully there was a bit of insight into the film, and that you now found a film that you've enjoyed. Of course, I've put many links down as to where you can purchase the film, both in Canada, the United States, the UK, and Japan itself. So thank you all for watching. Also, if you're not into buying the movie, you can catch it on the Criterion Channel or Amazon Prime Japan. So thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you for the next one.